All right, so a Stoic approach to teaching as theory and practice. So first I will talk about more theoretical stuff, philosophical stuff, and then I will apply it to actual practice of teaching. So for example, I will talk about some examples of different assignments that we can have based on this kind of pedagogy, Stoic pedagogy. All right, what is Stoicism? So first, these are the most famous three Stoic philosophers: Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. Epictetus was a slave, Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor, so a lot of diversity, not gender-wise, but a lot of diversity. I will, however, focus more on contemporary or modern Stoicism. It is also sometimes called Fifth Stoa. There's early Stoic philosophy, middle and late Stoic philosophy. Late Stoic philosophy is Roman Stoic philosophy, which those three people that you are seeing in your screen belong. And there is also Neo-Stoicism, which is Renaissance era, more Christian leaning. And now we have modern Stoicism. I will be mostly focusing on modern Stoicism because the classical Stoicism, they have some views about metaphysics and epistemology, psychology that might not be very acceptable today. Our contemporary modern Stoic philosophy focuses more on Stoicism as a way of life, right? As a philosophy of life. So I will try to apply this to education. First, let's see the basic tenets of Stoicism very quickly. I will not be giving arguments. I will just say what they believed, what Stoics believed, or what they believe today. Just to have a background, theoretical background for the pedagogy that I am proposing. First of all, according to Stoics, what causes distress to us is not events themselves, but our judgments about those events. So you can imagine two people experiencing exactly the same thing, but reacting differently. One of them is really anxious about it, really worried about it, really having negative emotions about it. The other one maybe just sees that as an opportunity to improve himself or herself. So judgments, how they value things, is the basis of whether something causes distress or not to us. So this is a very important Stoic principle, and this was actually the basis of cognitive and behavioral therapy. Right? Albert Ellis himself says that he bases this kind of therapy, rational emotive therapy, he bases it on Stoicism. Another principle, we should live in accordance with nature. By nature, the ancient Stoics, they understood both human nature and nature, whatever exists is nature, according to them. So modern Stoics, they interpret this as living in accordance with facts. So we should be susceptible to facts, right? We should care about the facts. But it also involves human nature, and this is very important. Human nature, according to Stoics, is both rational, so we should be rational, and social. So we should care about each other. We have responsibilities towards each other. That is one very, very central, claim in Stoicism. Some things are in our control, they say, and some things are not. This is one of the facts. We said one of the facts that we should care about, one of the most central, most important facts is that some things are in our control and some things are not. If something is not in your control, then worrying about it, being anxious about it, will not help because it's not in your control. So it's just irrational to worry about it. You can't do anything about it. But if it is in your control, then again, why would you worry about it? You should just do it because it's in your control. So worrying is always irrational according to them. So this, most of the distress that we have, according to Stoics, they cause from not seeing this fact about what things are in our control and what things are not. We try to control things that are not in our control, and we do not try to control what is in our control. So then that's why we are unhappy, according to them. It is rational to focus on what is in your control rather than what is not, again. And being virtuous, becoming more and more virtuous. You cannot just be a virtuous person. You cannot be a perfect person, but you can always become a better person. Being virtuous is in our control because it is all about our reactions to what happens to us. And we choose our own reactions. So it is always up to us to react appropriately. We cannot choose what will happen to us, but we can choose what to do about it and what to think about it, how to judge it, how to value it. So being virtuous is based on that, becoming virtuous. So it is in our control. Now, there is an interesting thing here then. They also say the main purpose of one's life should be virtue. Now, what do we have? The main purpose of your life is virtue, and virtue is in our control. So then we will never be frustrated. If that is your aim, to become a better and better person, since it is in your control, nothing can avoid that. Nothing can make you a bad person unless you permit it. So then if the purpose of your life is becoming a better person, then you will reach that goal. That goal is not being the person. It is becoming a better person. So you reach the goal moment by moment. That kind of a goal continues. And because of this, a virtuous life will be a happy life. Because your aim is to be a virtuous person and it is in your control. So you do it, you achieve your purpose, and then you have no reason to be unhappy. I am just very, in a nutshell, this is very, very short. Things that are not in our control, they call these indifference in the sense that, so for example, health, wealth, power, all kinds of power, being loved by people, being admired by people, things like that. They are called indifference, not because we shouldn't care about them at all. They are called indifference because they don't make a difference in terms of the main goal of life, which is virtue and being a good person. Being sick does not make you a bad person. And being poor does not make you a bad person. So that is why they are indifferent. They do not affect the main purpose. However, some indifference are preferred and some are dispreferred. For example, health is of course better than disease. Being powerful is of course better than being weak. Being wealthy is better than being poor. Why? Because then you can use those things in order to make the world a better place. You can actually perform your virtues to other people with these things that are preferred indifference. So some indifference are preferred. But the main thing is, if you don't have those things, that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. That doesn't mean that you failed. So preferred indifference are conditional or tentative, but not genuine goals. The genuine goal is becoming a better person. So as you can see, this is very important. You take yourself as a project in Stoicism. You are your own project. You are trying to become a better person. But of course, as you become a better person, morally speaking, then you are also making the world a better place. So you're focusing on yourself, but indirectly you are also influencing the world in the positive way. And lastly, attaining or avoiding indifference is not criterion for success or failure. The only criterion for success and failure is whether you are reacting to things that happen to you appropriately in such a way that you become a better person. Which direction are you living your life to? Right? Are you living life in the direction of becoming a better person or not? Having indifference in your life is not a criterion for failure and success. Okay, so in a nutshell, a very short summary of Stoicism. There is a lot more background to this, of course, in terms of metaphysics and epistemology and all that. But since we don't have time, and they are not that relevant to the pedagogical aspect that I will be talking about, so I think this will suffice. If there are any questions, of course, about Stoicism, we can talk about it after the presentation. So then there are some attitudes of a Stoic person, a Stoic student. By student, I don't mean undergrad. I mean the person who is living his or her life based on Stoicism, who is learning how to live their life. First of all, this person, the Stoic, has a growth mindset rather than fixed mindset. Right? The person sees things that happen to him or her as opportunities to become a better person, for self-development, rather than defining themselves with their failures. Right? So if I try to present this, for example, and I make a mistake, let's say I just cannot make the presentation, right? So I failed at the presentation. Then I can either say, okay, apparently I am not a person who can give talks, right? So I define myself with my failure, which is fixed mindset. Or I can focus on that. I can say, all right, that happened. I failed at this presentation. I couldn't do it. Now that happened. That is not in my control anymore, right? So this is called the dichotomy of control, whether I can control it or not. Well, I cannot control the past, but it's done. However, my reaction to it, how can I learn from this so that I can have this the preferred indifferent of, public speaking or something like that. Okay, so growth mindset, I always learn from my failures. This is my attitude. I just look from this perspective to everything that happens to me. A Stoic is, of course, rational, because we said the human nature, according to them, is rational, and also cares about facts. And this part is also important. They care about different perspectives, because we know, from a Stoic perspective, we should acknowledge that we are limited beings. So we should try different perspectives, right? So you can look at the same thing from different perspectives. And sometimes one perspective can be more appropriate than the other, even though maybe they are both accurate perspectives. Still, from some perspectives, you can emphasize some other property of the event that's going on, right? So, for example, in a moral issue, will you focus on the intention of the person who does the act, or should you focus more on the consequences of the action that was done? Which one is more salient? Which one is more relevant in terms of evaluation of this situation morally? This is practical wisdom. So wisdom, one of the virtues, according to Stoics. So you need to look at from different perspectives. You need to be able to look from different perspectives. And then what is the most appropriate perspective? Of course, if there is inaccuracy in that perspective, then that's done. Then it's not good. All right. Again, I'm quickly summarizing. We can talk about more concrete examples if you have questions about that. All right. Is constructive both for himself or herself and also in their relations to other people, in their social relations. Constructive. They try to, because they, as virtuous people, they try to make the world a better place and try to help other people, not just dismiss other people, but actually help other people. Experiments. So a Stoic experiments, right? They conduct experiments. So this is what John Stuart Mill did, his very famous phrase, experiments in living, right? So conducting experiments in living. So they try different methods. A Stoic tries different methods because, as I said, the Stoic takes himself or herself as a project, right? They try to become a better person. This is really central. They need to know themselves. So this is about caring about facts, right? They need to know themselves in order to do it, and they need to know the world, right? And one way of learning yourself is trying different things. So, for example, in terms of procrastination, right? So someone is trying to develop themselves, improve themselves in terms of avoiding procrastination. Some people say, well, the first thing in the morning, do the hardest thing, do the most difficult thing, and then it will be easier for you to work on the other things, right? So time management, procrastination kind of. Some people say, no, you should start with the easiest thing, because then you will have this, that impetus, that movement, if you start with the easier thing, and then it will be easier for you to move on to more difficult things. So start with the most difficult, start with the easiest. Well, these are two different strategies to do something about, against the habit of procrastination. We need to try which one works best, right? Because for some people it is starting with the most difficult. For some people it is starting with the easiest. Which time of day you are working, for example, most effectively, most efficiently. These are all experiments. So Stoics had many different practices. I won't be talking about those, but practices like cognitive behavioral therapy kind of practices. Some of them work for some people better than the others. So then people should try different things. This is a Stoic attitude. Has a holistic approach. So this is about a worldview. It is not like a Stoic doesn't take events in isolation and think about, okay, how should I evaluate this? They have this holistic approach. In the middle, at the center, there is this virtue as the purpose of life, and everything makes sense around that point of view, around that basic purpose. And lastly, a Stoic is patient. This takes time. This takes effort. So according to the Stoics, we should be self-sufficient, meaning you can be self-sufficient and you can find happiness in you. You do not need anything external. They are all indifference when it comes to happiness, right? So you can be self-sufficient in terms of happiness. But sometimes people say happiness is in you. You can just look at yourself, or like The Secret or quantum consciousness, all that pseudoscientific stuff. Maybe you are familiar with, maybe you have heard about this. So if you ask from the universe, and the universe will give it to you, so you can just be happy by, just wanting. If you really want to be happy, then you will be happy. Nothing like that, right? So those kind of approaches, they more like an archaeologist. You can just dig inside and find happiness. Stoics, they don't say this. Stoics say, in a way, they do say happiness is in you, but what they mean is the raw material is in you, and you will need to construct happiness based on that raw material. But it will take time and effort. So that's why patience is a very, very important Stoic attitude to life in general. Right? It will take time. I must be patient. I should, exert my effort. All right. Now, so this was, very generally speaking, basics of Stoicism in relation to how to live a good life. There are, of course, other parts of Stoic philosophy, as I said, like metaphysics, epistemology. I didn't talk about those. How can we apply these things to teaching? So I propose a Stoic pedagogy. I will not try to prove you that this is the best and we should all, accept this pedagogy. But I want to propose this, and I hope that you will find it interesting and, even applicable. I hope even useful. I hope you will find maybe some parts of it, at least. Okay. So how can we apply this to teaching? First of all, then the aim of teaching, according to this kind of pedagogy, the aim of education would be helping students become self-learners, right? Improving them. Because, again, what was the most important thing? Being self-sufficient, according to Stoics. Self-sufficiency. You do not need anyone's approval. For example, you do not need health, you do not need money to be a good person. Being a good person is in you. So when we apply this approach to learning, right, to education, then we would want our students to be self-learners. And how can we do this? This is, of course, about development and improvement, cultivation of skills and attitudes. Besides, of course, in addition to the content of the course, of course, there's the content of the course. In addition to that, we need to focus on the skills and attitudes of the students that will help them become self-learners. I will talk about a lot of different things now, but I want to emphasize this. I do think that developing these skills and attitudes in our students are very important, but this is not at the expense of the content of the course. I am not saying that we shouldn't teach anything else than just these. What I'm saying is this. If I want my students to learn the content of the course, right? So for example, I'm teaching social and political philosophy, let's say, and I want my students to learn actually the content of the course, right? From a from a Stoic pedagogical point of view, it would be ideal if my students would learn these things without needing me, right? If I can help them become people who would be interested in these things that I'm teaching and who would be able to learn these things without needing me, I think that would be the ultimate success for me as a teacher. Because I'm not just teaching the content of the course, I'm also teaching and encouraging them. I'm teaching them how to, and I'm also encouraging them to learn for themselves and go further with that. Okay. So in that sense, self-learner, in that sense, self-sufficient. All these attitudes that we talked about, we can see them as virtues. Like I said, there are virtues according to Stoic philosophy, and there are indifference, right? Preferred indifference. So virtues are essential. We can see these are virtues. These are no way the classical Stoic virtues. They have 4 virtues: wisdom, courage, moderation, and justice. Of course, this is not that list. But for our purposes, when we apply this to teaching, I think we can see these as virtues. These are the important things that we try to cultivate in our students, the virtues. By different assignments, and I will give I will make some suggestions about these assignments. How can we cultivate these things? We will talk about that in the next slide. What about the skills? And I think we can see the skills as preferred indifference. The skills, because they are power. They use them, right, in their journey to become better people or better, self-learners. These are not exhaustive lists, by the way, both the attitudes and the skills. These are just some suggestions. Of course, these are not exhaustive. I mean, you can think of something else. This is just the list that works for me, right? Just that. Just suggestions. So, of course, reading, writing, and communication skills, right? Of course, we should focus on these. And I didn't say presentation only, but also communication in general. Of course, this involves public speaking and presenting and all that, but also all kinds of communication, interpersonal relations. Effective research. Again, if we want them to become self-learners, then we should also teach them how to do research, effectively. What sources are reliable and what sources are not reliable, how to distinguish reliable from unreliable, how to access those sources. These are all important skills, right? I think we should teach our students. Time management, self-discipline. These are also very important. I'm aware that these are not part of the content of the course. But in order for them to learn, they need to be good at these things in time and self-discipline. And by self-discipline, I mostly mean, avoiding procrastination. So I think we should focus on this. I think this must be part of our course objectives. Content and also this. Again, not at the expense of the content, of course. But I believe, we should explicitly address these things. And we should design our assignments to cultivate these skills, in addition to teaching the content. And one very important thing is metacognition, cognition about cognition. They're thinking about their own thinking, which is they're being aware of their learning, studying, thinking habits, right? Self-monitoring. I call this reading your own mind, right? Metacognition, reading your own mind. So they should read their own mind. So their background assumptions and things like that when they are thinking, their habits and all those things. Of cognitive habits. I think we should have some assignments or activities for the students that address these things, that try to cultivate these skills. I'm also thinking it is possible to have a separate course for this, like Learning 101 or something, I don't know. Like we have GE courses, right? The GE course, orientation kind of thing. So I do think a course on learning for students would be very, very helpful, I think. So I'm talking about us, the instructors, and how can we develop our teaching based on this kind of pedagogy, but also there's the curriculum level things that can be done, right? Universal level things that can be done. I really think we should teach our students how to manage time, how to avoid procrastination and how to do effective research and things like that. I know that they are being done, by the way, in the orientation, but I am thinking more systematic and more rigorous kind of approach to this. Okay. All right, now more practical stuff. What can we do about it? Now, I try different things. Every semester I try different things. Now I will talk about my experiences. I will talk about the things that I have personally tried. And some of them worked, some of them didn't. I will be focusing more on the things that worked, so that actually you might think maybe you might want to implement some of those things and maybe just adapt into your own teaching. Because some of them I'm really happy with, actually. All right, so then I will briefly talk about these assignments, and I will try to link also them to the skills and attitudes. First of all, of course, peer review kind of assignments. What I did was, so there's also scaffolding is very important, right? So multiple stages of a term paper, for example, or an essay. They propose their own topics. I do that. They propose their own topics. And peer review works more about when they have their own topics. Then I give them an outline, structured outline template, and then they have their outline and I give feedback. Both to their proposed topics and also their outlines, I give feedback, which is not that difficult in terms of being time consuming, right? Grading and giving feedback. Outline, so they have their thesis statement, their argument for their thesis statement, possible objections, possible responses, like bullet point. And it's very easy to actually grade and give feedback. Then they write their first draft based on very specific instructions, and I have a video on YouTube about how to write a philosophy essay, so I give some instructions about how to write an essay. Actually, we have a class discussion about how to write an essay. We have a class discussion about what is a good essay and what is not. Then peer review is they are in groups, like three students ideally, and they read each other's. Each student reads two other students' essays, first drafts, and they give feedback to each other based on detailed instructions, based on detailed standards for a good essay. Now, this really helps because this is part of, first of all, they are helping each other. So this is very stoic. They are really helping each other. So this is good. Also, they learn to look from a different perspective to their own essay. Once they read these two other essays, then they see some problems there, right? So maybe some examples are not very clear, maybe signposting is not used very appropriately and things like that, or not sufficiently. Then they can also read their own essay from a perspective of an outsider, right? From the perspective of a different person. So this helps them. So peer review, I find it very useful for this. This is also about self-sufficiency. Also, it is good for me because less grading, the peer review thing. So it's also, that's also good, I think. And that's an important thing. So they do give feedback to each other in this. Plus, you might think, of course, the teacher can give better feedback, right, to the first draft. Of course, the teacher knows more. However, in peer review, they can give each other feedback by not understanding. Because if they say, I didn't understand this part, I didn't understand this sentence, maybe the teacher would understand it actually, but they don't understand. So then by saying that I didn't understand this part, how is this linked to the other thing? Are you giving an objection to this statement or that argument, or what are you doing here? By not understanding, they are actually helping each other clarify those parts. So I find this actually very good for students too. Both the students who give, as they give feedback, and also they receive feedback. They do receive some good feedback because of this. All right, so for example, this is one kind of assignment. Peer instruction. So what I did was a group quiz. So I give, they all complete their quizzes individually, but they work in groups. So I first give them 5 to 10 minutes or maybe even more to work individually. Then they come up in groups, they are divided in groups, and in the groups, they discuss about the questions. And then individually, they submit their answers. So in those groups, they really instruct each other, they really teach each other. Right? So this is actually a very, very lively conversation and discussion is going on in group quizzes. This is one way of doing peer instruction. Of course, there are many other ways. I'm just giving some examples. Oikios is a Stoic term, which means inviting someone to your household, that kind of a thing. So oikios is, so I care about myself. I also care about my family. Then what's the difference between my family and my neighbors, for example, just because they are related to me? Just being related to me doesn't make someone more valuable than others. So I should also care about my neighbors. But if I care about my neighbors, then similarly, right, I should care about everyone in the city, in the country, in the world, right? So this is oikios. I just, expand the circle of concern, right? So I just care about everyone. The idea is, the society is important, the community is important, right? So I should be looking to outside, actually, not just myself. by cultivating myself, by improving myself as a virtuous person, I should be looking at outside and the society. So I think from a Stoic point of view, it would be very good to include people outside of the class into the course. One way of doing it, one standard way of doing this, which I don't do, is service learning, but I am looking for opportunities, looking for different ideas to actually do some service learning. That is, students actually contributing to the community as part of their coursework. So that's, I think, a very good thing. I think from a Stoic point of view, this will be very good. I haven't come up with a good way of doing it for my own courses, but I want to say that this is something to keep in mind. This will be very good, actually. What I did was an interview project, and I want to strongly recommend this, actually, if it's your style. So what I mean by this, I'm teaching social and political philosophy to non-philosophy students. So they will not be writing standard philosophy papers, actually. So then, instead of focusing on more teaching them how to write a standard philosophy paper, I focus more on argumentation and communication and clearly expressing your ideas and supporting your ideas rationally, that kind of stuff. So here's what they do in order to achieve these things or learn these things. Each student finds a topic and finds a person with whom they disagree about that topic, right? So for example, the student believes that there's objective morality, so then they find someone, a friend, a family member, who disagrees, who thinks morality is all subjective. For example, right? They make an interview, they conduct an interview with that person. At each stage, of course, they inform me about how this is going and who they are working with, that kind of stuff. They make a presentation, they conduct an interview, and then their term project, the essay, will be an interview report, but a philosophical interview report, because this is a philosophy course, right? So they use the theories, they use the terminology. Of course, the person they are interviewing with, and I require that that person should be a person who has never taken a philosophy course. So they don't use the terminology. They are unaware of all the theories. So they are like in daily language, they talk in the daily language. And then the student translates it into philosophical terminology, relates it to all the theories that they have learned in that semester, right? And they do evaluate the arguments. The interview is more like a debate. So there are a lot of arguments, and then they evaluate the arguments in their term paper. Now, one thing they learn from this is they learn how important terminology is, for example. They see the logical errors that are done, like ambiguity, like equivocation, right? They see the logical mistakes. For example, the people they are interviewing with, they conflate, for example, necessary condition and sufficient condition, let's say, right? They can see those things. They can see how much they have learned. So this is about metacognition. They see their own development in that course. I think that's very good motivation for their becoming self-learners, because they see that they have learned things, and they see how better it is to have the terminology and to know these theories when discussing these issues. This is also, again, outside of classroom, right? So they're reaching outside of the classroom. Okay, so this, one other thing, this is not about Stoic pedagogy, but I know many of us are concerned with plagiarism when it comes to essays, right? Some students do pay and buy essays, right? If you require the recording of the interview itself, then it will be virtually impossible for them to buy the essay, right, for this. Because this is very specific. They first they first let me know about the topic they want to conduct the interview, and then they do the interview, and the record is on Moodle. They upload the record, the audio record on Moodle, and then they write the essay. And I also have a one-on-one, one-on-one meeting with each student too. So then it is virtually impossible for them to buy an essay like this. They must be involved because you can hear their voices in the interview, and then you will have the end product. But that's just a side issue. It's not part of Stoic pedagogy, but it's a good thing, and it's a plus. All right. Assignment design. The students can have assignment design as an assignment. One example of this can be question proposals. So I do have quizzes and multiple choice quizzes. People sometimes they don't like multiple choice because they think multiple choice must be about just memorizing things, but of course it is not. You can actually go very high in the Bloom's taxonomy with cognitive levels. You can really go high, there. So I have those. The question proposal is this. I ask students to come up with some questions, for example, 2 questions for the quiz. And the incentive is, of course, it is required and graded, but also the incentive is some of them, if they are good, will be chosen to appear in the quiz, the actual quiz. So they can see their own question. Right? So that's an incentive. Now, prepare a question. Give the correct answer and explain why it is the correct answer. And explain why that question should be included in the quiz. Also, explain why that question is a good question. Now, this really, if they do it, if they take it seriously, this really helps them see the whole thing from a different perspective. Now they need to think, in order to ask a good question, they need to think, what are the common misunderstandings? What can be the common misunderstandings about this topic that I can address? Right? It involves, metacognition, because they are looking at their own misunderstandings and then how they corrected their misunderstanding, and they are thinking about the topic and how other people might misunderstand so that they can address those misunderstandings to have a good question. Some students did not take this seriously, and this did nothing to them, actually. So they just did the minimum, a question, and then explanation of the question, explanation why that's a good question. Well, because we talked a lot about this topic in the classroom, so that's why it's a good question. Oh, okay. But some students who really took this seriously, they really benefited from it. I know they benefited from it, and how I know it, I will explain in a moment. Okay, so for example, right, so this is another thing. Class discussions, of course, class discussions, it can be small group discussions and the whole class discussions. What I found very helpful is discussion evaluation from after the discussion. So some questions about the discussion. For example, asking a question like, what did you learn from this discussion, actually says something to the students. It says that you are supposed to be learning something. This is not just, we are not chatting, right? You are supposed to be learning something. What skills do you think you have developed, or something like that? What further questions do you have for you to explore individually, right, personally? This gives them the correct impression that they are supposed to be leaving with questions, and they are supposed to be adding further to this topic for themselves, right? So what questions are you leaving with to explore yourself, right? This is again like leading students to become self-learners, right? All right, 1 minute papers. At the end of the class, this can be done at the end of the class, just a question, just a very short question, very short answer. What was the thing that you found the most interesting, for example, in today's discussion? Or what is the muddiest point? A version of this is the muddiest point. What is the muddiest points? What did you didn't understand, or something like that? Or do you have any questions? Something like that. Then, using these things in the next class gives the students the impression, and I think again it's the correct impression, that they have a say in the content of the course too, right? Because you are addressing what they have asked, what they have said. And you say, I have seen this common mistake in your minute papers, for example, and then you address that next time. So then this really helps students becoming a part of the course, right? Become part of the class. So they are not just coming to class, but they are actually taking responsibility. They are actually leading. This also is, of course, important for metacognition. At the end of this class, they are looking back at the class hour, and they evaluate it. And lastly, this is very, very important, I think, self-evaluations. So twice a semester, I have self-evaluation assignments, particularly to meet some of the things that we have talked about in Stoic pedagogy. At the middle of the semester, and they have actually submitted their self-evaluations for this semester, I ask questions like, so for example, some question about the content, and the important thing is what, for example, one of the questions, among the things that you have learned so far this semester, which ones can you use in your daily life or in your other courses? This can be a skill, this can be an attitude, this can be knowledge, whatever, right? What things can you use? Again, to give to show the students that they are supposed to be using these things in their life. Another question is, so far, what was the most challenging aspect of this course? What was the most difficult thing? What was the thing that you have the most difficulty with? And what can you do about it for the rest of the semester? Right? I really ask the students to devise a strategy for themselves, to improve themselves about that thing that they are having difficulty with in the course. Right? And at the end of the semester, in the second self-evaluation, I ask, how did it go? Did you implement it? Right? And if not, then I say, then they are supposed to implement it in other courses in next semester. Okay, so as you can see, this is just directly about self-improvement, and this is about becoming a self-learner and things like that. Okay, so this is the last slide. I will quickly summarize, and then if there are any questions, we can talk about them. So as you can see, active learning is a very, very important part of this, right? So it's just essential, it's just central, active learning. Also, student empowerment. If they have more control over the course itself, it's better, right? Because we are teaching them to become more powerful in this sense. Beliefs and judgments about the course and value alignment is important. So this is about the holistic approach. So they need to value the course, right? Most of the courses, and this is most of the students, they might be thinking that this is just for the grade, right? That is not good. If we focus more on attitude and skill development, then I believe students can see that they can benefit a lot from this course, even if they don't care that much about the content, the specific content of the course, because they will be improving themselves as self-learners. I think this will help for student motivation a lot, if we can communicate this fact to students. Right? Yes, the content is important, of course. If we are teaching it, then we think that it's important. Okay, the content is important, but I mean, people have different, interest, and the student can think that I will never use in my professional life the content of this course. Still, though, if they are learning some skills, then it will be good for them. I think they will be motivated to take this course more seriously, I think, in general. And of course, transformation and habit building is central. Last thing I want to say is the role of the teacher. So in this Stoic pedagogy, then the teacher is not the sage on the stage, right? The teacher is not someone who bestows upon students the knowledge, that kind of thing. So it's not that. From a Stoic point of view, the teacher is an experienced learner. There is actually term, sophos, which is translated as sage, like the person who has kind of completed the Stoic education, right? The Stoics say a sage comes like once in 500 years or so. Socrates, for example, was one, probably, they said. This is not real. This is not, everyone, all these philosophers, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, they were all students of Stoicism still. So every teacher is also a learner, according to Stoicism. They are called prokopton. They are in the way, in the progress of becoming a better person. No one actually in real life is done. This is important because the teacher is supposed to be a role model of also in Stoicism. As a learner, I think being a role model to students as a learner, if you are also a learner, I think it's much better. And lastly, I think this is the best analogy for a teacher from a Stoic perspective, like a fitness coach. A fitness coach does not do the fitness thing, right? So the trainee lifts the weights and everything. The trainee runs, not the coach, but the coach helps the trainee do it appropriately in the right way. But the work is done by the trainee. So this focus on this is also very active learning, based idea. Terry Doyle has a slogan about this from active learning. He says, "Whoever does the work does the learning." So if I just lecture, then I practice public speaking. So I am learning more than the students, right? If I just lecture and do nothing, if I don't involve the students into the discussion or some class activities. One other important thing about this fitness coach analogy, I think, is the best fitness coach is the one who makes himself or herself redundant for the trainee, right? If I'm a good fitness coach, then if I'm doing my job well, there will come some point that the trainee will not need me anymore. So they will become self-learner. I think this is a very good analogy for a Stoic point of view about a teacher, right? So as teachers, based on this Stoic pedagogy, I don't know if you find this convincing or not, relatable or not, but according to this Stoic pedagogy, the main aim of the teacher should be teaching students how not to need the teacher anymore, right? So making yourself redundant. All right, thank you very much for your attention. I think this was all that I wanted to say. And if you have any questions, then we can talk. So I will just stop sharing. And I think there are some, I will just answer that. I think there are some questions in the chat part. Very quickly, I will address that. Do you grade how students evaluate each other? No, I don't do that, but of course it can be done. It's part of the practice. People do that. I don't do that. It can be done, of course. Can we call skills preferred in soft? Yeah, I do think so. Yeah, I think soft skills, in general, I think soft skill, that term, that fits actually. I agree. All right, so if you can press raise hand if you want to, if there are any questions, you can press raise hand at the bottom of the participants section.
I think Jamal Ban has a question.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, please.
Physically raised my hand. Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, please.
Yes. So thank you first of all for the presentation. It was very explanatory and certainly helpful. I would like to give some points and ask at the same time some questions. Well, my name is Jamal and I do come from the Department of Tourism and Hotel Management, just to present myself. Mm-hmm. So let me start with your last point when you try to describe the role of a teacher. Uh-huh. I cannot agree anymore with you. Mm-hmm. So certainly for me, and I tried this for so many years, a teacher is not a teacher in the classical sense, but should be a moderator and facilitator of learning. Mm-hmm. One important thing, and I agree with you, the best football referee is the one who doesn't break the game, who doesn't whistle a lot.
Yeah.
Well, coming to this issue of asking students to evaluate themselves and see what skills do they have or what challenging things they learned, etc. Actually, I'm doing the same thing. In each of my course, right after the midterm, I have what I call a mid-semester evaluation, where it starts with correcting the exam together with the students, then have a small PowerPoint explaining a lot of issues and give some statistics about the course up so far. Then it continues with debating with the students what went wrong, what went fine, what good things they learned up so far, if there are any problems. any improvement, what they devise for improvements for the future to make themselves better. And I have at the very end a mid-semester evaluation questionnaire that I give them with 20 statements. They fill them out. I average everything. I place it in my webpage again. Certainly, I look at whatever problems they have, and I try to improve my course afterwards for the remaining part of the semester. And the good thing, I do the same thing just before the final, giving them the same questionnaire before the final and have a various analysis. Another thing I would like to ask, just by curiosity, because for so many years, I adopted the following cliche answer to students who, just before the exam, come and ask me, well, sir, I'm very stressful. What can I do about this? It's harming me. And I tell them all the time to calm down. And then I tell them there are two categories of stress. Now, this is most probably, this comes from my personal experience or whatever. There are two categories of stress. If you have minimum stress that you can still control, then that's good. Good stress. Stress make us live. Stress make us achieve objectives. Stress make us be devoted to reach certain aims. So there is nothing wrong with stress. But whenever stress starts to accumulate in a way that controls you, then there you are in trouble. So enough of stress that you can control is good, but more than that, you start to be in trouble if you cannot control it. Well, why I'm saying this, when you were talking about modern Stoicism, you talked about things that we cannot control and things we can control, etc. So I wanted just your opinion on this issue. I mean, my cliche answer, was that a correct answer? Or according to a Stoic approach, you might have other things to say about this?
Thank you very much for this question. By the way, before I address that question, so this football referee analogy, I also like that very much, because the best referee is the invisible one, right? So, thank you for that. Okay, stress. The Stoic approach to stress is that it is, first of all, natural. Right? Stress, anxiety, things like that is natural. It just happens. Anger, like things like that, it just comes from us. They call these things propatheia. They just like a reaction, like an emotional reaction, right? So like the reflex. But also there is some kind of stress or anxiety that is more cognitive, that is based on our beliefs. So for example, my thinking that I shouldn't be stressed right now, and then I have a stress about my stress, right? Meta stress, so to speak, right? That part is in our control, because it is based on our beliefs, our judgments about the stress, that automatic stress, right? And according to Stoics, the main problem, what makes us unhappy in our life, is the second kind, right? That's more cognitive, because it is more chronic rather than acute, right? It is more chronic. So the Stoic approach would be improving yourself to have different perspectives about this, to approach this more objectively. But again, patience is very important. There are no quick answers in Stoic approach. So it is this. Well, are you stressed? Well, it is too late now. Okay, so that happened. That's not in your control. That already happened. What you can do is you can take responsibility for your own self-development, and you can try in time to become a person who is not affected negatively from this stress. So in time, when you look at things more objectively and you understand your place in the world as a limited person, right? First of all, the propatheia, the stress, it soothes, right? So it soothes down. But also, the most importantly, you do not worry now about the stress, because you think that stress is just natural and it is something that happens to you. And like anything that happens to you, it doesn't have the power to make you a worse person, morally speaking. And from a Stoic point of view, since virtue is the most important thing, and being anxious doesn't make you an unvirtuous person, so then you don't worry about it. Now that in time, of course, this will be internalized, then in time, well, actually, you don't have this meta stress now. And that was the main issue, right? That's the main issue people have. People just think, I will make a presentation, for example, and I think, what happens if I stutter, right? What happens if I just mispronounce something? What if people think that I am not, competent? What if people laugh at me? Well, nothing happening. Everything is happening right in my mind right now. I'm making myself stressed, right? These are all beliefs. This might happen. It shouldn't happen. If it happens, I will be destroyed. These are all cognitive, actually. These are my judgments. And Stoics, they focus more on this part, and they say, if you take care of that part, then you will have a much more, you will have much more tranquility in your life. So by happiness, they mean something like tranquility, apatheia or ataraxia, which means not being troubled in your mind. This takes time, as I said. The raw material of happiness is in you, according to Stoics, but you need to construct a good life from that. You need to work. So I think that's the Stoic approach. Thank you. All right. Any other questions or comments?
I mean, I have a stress about grading, because when I grade students and when I grade and I see that they are doing poorly, I see it as a reflection of my own failure. And so I try to procrastinate on that as much as possible until I can't anymore. But maybe a Stoic approach would be thinking, look, I've done the best that I could. I've tried to teach them, but I can't control how much they learn. I can't control if they're actually going to read the resources that I shared, and so many things that I can do, but so many things that I can't control. So it's not really a reflection of my teaching when they do it poorly.
So, I mean, they have a lot of courses, right? They have a lot of courses. A lot of things are going on in people's lives. There is this virus. Then there was the earthquake. A lot of things, a lot of tragedies, maybe, right, in people's lives. These things happen, of course. I mean, they don't just exist in our classrooms, right, or Zoom, whatever. So there are many things. So I think we should accept that. But I think from a Stoic approach, I think it is very difficult from a Stoic approach to say that I did my best. I think,
right. I mean, there's always room for improvement. Definitely.
Yeah. So I don't know actually what can be done, but what else can be done? Maybe there are sometimes maybe we should change our approach, maybe change our idea of assignment, idea of assessment, things like that. Maybe more radical changes. But so I talked about as a pedagogy, and I focused on the students. But of course, we can talk about a Stoic teacher, right? What should a teacher do? And I think the experimentation thing is also that applies to the teacher too. Just try different things, and if it works and if it doesn't work. But I definitely agree that the Stoics would say some things are not in your control. You will say something, and then some students will misunderstand you, even if you didn't do anything wrong, right? So you expressed yourself very well, but the student was playing with their phone. They just misheard you, and then they say you taught this in the class, but you didn't say that. But these things happen. So Marcus Aurelius says the obstacle becomes the way. So this is very Stoic. Or the obstacle becomes the way. If we apply the Stoicism to being a teacher, and if our purpose in teaching is becoming a better teacher, then the thing is, I think Marcus Aurelius would say, you can use anything that happens to you to become a better teacher, right? So if something happens, you can have different perspectives. As I said, one perspective is, this shouldn't have happened. I am so unlucky. I'm so unfortunate. This is one perspective. The other perspective is, it is natural that these things happen. People do these things. People are misunderstood sometimes. What can I learn from this? What can I do about this? How can I react to this? So as you can see, this is much less stressful and anxious kind of approach. And this is part of acceptance. There's something called Stoic, you know it, but there is something called Stoic acceptance. And these things are not in our control, but using them to become better people is in our control. So we should focus on that. That's the Stoic, I think that's the Stoic approach for a teacher. That would be a Stoic approach, I think. Yeah, which is not easy, of course, which is not easy. But they don't say it's easy, right? And,
we are going to learn it.
Yeah, learning. We must be self-learners of Stoic, life. I think they would say, because some people say, like these gurus, they say happiness is in you and it is very easy. Just you need to want. Whenever someone says something is easy, they are selling something, I think. So this is not very easy. Reyyan Ayfer.
Hello, I really like the idea about skills, but we had a good old department, computer teacher education. Can Hocam is here, he will remember. Because we saw the need that our students need some skills like time management, communication, blah, blah, blah. We designed a course and put it into first year.
Okay.
Students hated it.
Really?
We said, okay, they didn't understand the need, so they don't think that they need this. We moved it to second year, they hated more. It didn't work. And finally, it was such a nice course. It was so much fun. Maybe we were not capable of making them to understand why we have this course, but it didn't work. Maybe it's cultural.
Yeah.
Maybe it's too late at university level. Maybe it should be in high school. But that's a great idea. So we tried to put each topic into one of the courses. So without putting it in a box. That was a great experience that we learned.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing this, actually. So I didn't know this, actually, that you have.
Yeah, this good old department doesn't exist anymore. But we had so many good courses, and we were all trying what you are explaining here. Now, thank you so much. I learned a few different ways also. Thank you so much.
Sure, thank you. Okay. Yeah,
and Tufan, did you also read this book, The Mindset? This is basically talking about the growth mindset and fixed mindset.
I didn't read the book, but yes, it is the book. But I didn't read the book, but yes, that's what I was talking about.
Yes, Carol Dweck is the writer. I recommend it. It's all about changing the way you think about things. And I really enjoyed it. I think all of our students should read it before they come to university. I agree with Reyyan Hocam.
Maybe we should. Maybe like the prep school, right?
Right.
So like English teaching, like learning, teaching how to learn or something. John, could you?
Yeah.
Actually, they have.
I have a theoretical question here.
Sure.
I wonder from the philosophical perspective how we can deal with it. So focusing on the growth mindset, that shows that you value how the growth of the student from where he starts till where he reaches. And sometimes imagine that we have a student who works a lot, do lots of things, pays a lot of efforts, but because of the preliminary skills maybe, from previous years or from some different mindsets that he or she has. Although he or she do lots of things, he may not reach the goal of the course in terms of content or the end. But you can see that he or she made a huge growth. Mm-hmm. So in that terms, evaluating is a challenge for the teacher. Because if you're designing your course based on growth mindset and this can be, from the Stoic perspective, this can be something that is out of his control. I remember a student when we were trying to teach programming. She did lots of things, and I asked her to bring a recipe of a food that she knows very well, but in a very detailed format, like a computer program. And she said that she tried her best, but the result was not the thing we aim. And it was very challenging for me to evaluate, because if I look at the effort, he got a good point. She needs to get a good point. But looking at the products, maybe she should fail.
Yeah.
And it's a very challenging thing. I don't know how can we solve those kind of things from the philosophical perspective, maybe.
Performance evaluation, Can Hocam.
Yeah.
You evaluate the performance, especially philosophical concepts like which don't have a strict answer. And algorithms may vary also. There are many ways.
Yeah, but this is also always interesting for me, focusing on the growth process or the content. It's always challenging for teachers. That's
I totally agree. I mean, so on the one hand, there are some students, they really, try, and that's a good thing. They do try, they participate and things like that. But if that student at the end of the semester believes that, for example, Socrates was a hedonist or something like that, just doesn't know the basics, well, so they don't meet the basics. I have a participation grade. So that is basically for performance, actually, for trying. But also the other things like also my assignments are very easy in the sense that, for example, discussion evaluations. After a discussion, I ask, what was the most interesting thing you have heard, for example, right? And what other questions do you have? So they can do it. So every student can do it. So every student secures some, points because of those assignments. And then the rest is, of course, actual content stuff. That's also important. I mean, that what distinguishes one course from the other, right? The content is important, of course. And we need to assess their knowledge of the content too. That's how I do it, actually. So there are multiple assignments that are not based on content. So I take care of the performance part there, and or the effort part there, and then some assignments that are more, particularly focusing on the content. So, for example, I had a reading response assignment, and one question was just put the most interesting sentence from the reading as a quote. That also gives them idea to what to write about in their essay too. Right, so each week they do that. So easy things. So I have some easy assignments, right, like that. But they still lead the students to engage with the content too. Anyway, so this was just something. All right, thank you very much. It is 3:10, so I think we should end this now. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you took something from this. I think this was helpful.
Certainly.
I hope this was helpful.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Hocam.